Most people say they know how valuable time is. They repeat the same words over and over: time is precious. Yet their daily actions tell a different story. Hours disappear on meaningless distractions, important dreams are pushed aside, and every delay is excused with the same promise: I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow has a strange habit of becoming another tomorrow. Money can return after it is lost. A broken business can be rebuilt. Even failed opportunities can sometimes come back in another form. Time is different. Once a minute slips away, no power on earth can bring it back. This is the story of a young man who believed he had endless time ahead of him, and the simple lesson that changed his life forever. In a peaceful village surrounded by farms and quiet roads lived a widowed shopkeeper and his only son. The father believed in honest work. Before sunrise every morning, he opened his small grocery shop, greeted his customers with a smile, and returned home after sunset, exhausted but content. His son, however, lived in a completely different world. While others began their day with purpose, he remained asleep. When he finally woke up, he spent his time chatting with friends, wandering through the streets, drinking tea at roadside stalls, and watching life pass by. Whenever someone advised him to think about his future, he laughed and replied, "I'm still young. There's plenty of time." The father tried everything. He spoke kindly. He warned him. He even became angry. Nothing changed. Eventually, he realized something important. People rarely change because of advice. They change when they discover the truth for themselves. Days turned into months. Every evening the father watched his son waste another day, and every evening his heart grew a little heavier. He wasn't worried about money. He was worried that his son was wasting something far more valuable. One quiet evening, the father opened an old wooden cabinet that had not been touched for years. Inside lay a vintage pocket watch wrapped carefully in a faded cloth. Although old, the watch still worked perfectly. Its hands moved steadily, reminding anyone who looked at it that time never pauses. The next morning, the father handed the watch to his son. "I want you to do something for me," he said. The boy looked confused. "Take this watch to the marketplace. Show it to different people and ask them how much they would pay for it. Listen carefully to every answer, then come back." The task sounded easy. Curious, the young man slipped the watch into his pocket and headed toward the busy town market. The streets were full of life. Vendors shouted to attract customers. Children laughed while running through the crowd. Bicycles rang their bells as people hurried from one shop to another. The boy entered the first store and placed the watch on the counter. The shopkeeper examined it for a few seconds before saying, "I'll give you 500. At another shop, someone offered 700. A collector looked more closely and said, "Maybe 1,000. It's old but still useful." Every person gave a different price. By late afternoon, the boy returned home. His father asked, "So, what did you learn today?" The son shrugged. Everyone values it differently. Some think it's worth very little, while others think it's worth much more. The father smiled but said nothing. Instead, he simply replied, "Tomorrow, I have another task for you. The boy had no idea that the second journey would change the way he looked at every hour of his life. The boy smiled and asked, "Do you want me to sell it this time?" The father shook his head. "No. Today I want you to ask people something different." "What should I ask?" The father looked into his son's eyes and calmly replied, "Ask them one simple question. What is the value of the time inside this watch?" The boy frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "You'll understand later," his father answered. Although the request sounded strange, the young man walked back toward the marketplace. As soon as he reached the first shop, he showed the watch and asked, "Sir, can you tell me the value of the time inside this watch?" The shopkeeper laughed loudly. "What nonsense! Time inside a watch. Either sell it or stop wasting my time." Embarrassed, the boy quietly walked away. At another store, a customer stared at him with surprise. "Young man, have you lost your mind? Time isn't something people buy." Someone else joked with his friends. Another ignored him completely. Everywhere he went, people either laughed, dismissed him, or refused to answer. For the first time in a long while, the young man felt uncomfortable. As he walked through the crowded streets, he noticed something he had never paid attention to before. Everyone was busy. Workers carried heavy boxes. Students rushed to school. Shopkeepers served customers without stopping. No one seemed interested in wasting even a few extra minutes. Yet he had spent months doing exactly that. Slowly, the laughter of strangers began to feel like a mirror reflecting his own careless life. Disappointed, he decided to return home. But just before leaving the market, something caught his eye. At the far end of a narrow street stood a tiny watch repair shop. It was old and quiet. Hundreds of clocks covered the walls. Some were large, some tiny, some modern, and some so ancient they looked like museum pieces. Inside sat an elderly watchmaker wearing round glasses. His hands moved carefully as he repaired a broken pocket watch. Unlike everyone else, his face carried peace instead of hurry. The young man stepped inside. "Sir," he said politely, "may I ask you something?" The old watchmaker smiled. "Of course." The boy held out the watch and repeated the same unusual question. "What is the value of the time inside this watch?" Instead of laughing, the old man became silent. He looked at the watch. Then he looked at the young man. Finally, he smiled gently. "My son," he said softly, "you have asked one of the greatest questions a person can ever ask." The room became completely quiet except for the ticking of dozens of clocks. "The watch itself has a price," the old man continued. "Different buyers will offer different amounts. Some see an old object. Others see a valuable antique. But the time shown by this watch," he paused for a moment, "has no price at all." The young man listened carefully. "You can replace money. You can rebuild a house. You can even recover after failure. But if 1 hour of your life disappears..." The old watchmaker looked directly into his eyes. "Who can return it to you, care?" The boy lowered his head. "No one." The old man nodded. "Exactly. That is why time is the richest gift every human receives. It costs nothing. Yet nothing in this world is more valuable. The ticking of the clocks suddenly sounded louder than ever before. For the first time, the young man wasn't simply hearing words. He was beginning to understand them. The old watchmaker carefully placed the watch back into the young man's hands. Before he left, the old man spoke once more. Never forget this. Every morning, life deposits 24 fresh hours into your account. You can spend them wisely. You can waste them. But you can never save them for tomorrow. When the day ends, whatever time remains simply disappears. It never comes back. The young man stood silently. Those words echoed in his mind. For the first time, he realized that every lazy morning, every unnecessary delay, and every excuse had quietly stolen a piece of his future. He thanked the old watchmaker and slowly walked home. The streets looked exactly the same. The shops were still busy. Children were still laughing. The clocks were still ticking. Yet everything felt different. Because the change had happened inside him. When he reached home, his father was waiting outside the house. Without saying a word, the young man handed him the watch. "I finally understand," he said quietly. His father smiled. "What did you learn?" The young man took a deep breath. "I thought time was endless. I believed I could always begin tomorrow. But today I discovered that tomorrow is never guaranteed. Every hour I waste is a piece of my own life that I lose forever." The father's eyes filled with happiness. He gently placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "I wanted you to learn this lesson from life itself," he said. "Advice is easy to forget. But experience stays with us forever." He woke up before sunrise. He helped his father open the shop. Instead of sitting at tea stalls, he learned new skills. Instead of wasting evenings, he read books and planned his future. The transformation did not happen overnight. Some days were difficult. Months passed. People in the village began noticing the difference. The same young man who once avoided responsibility had become one of the hardest working people in town. Years later, he built a successful business of his own. Whenever someone asked him the secret behind his success, he smiled and replied, "It all started with an old watch." He never forgot the lesson hidden inside it. The value was never in the watch itself. The real treasure was the time it reminded him to protect. Every one of us owns the same 24 hours each day. Some people invest them in learning. Some invest them in building relationships. Some invest them in chasing their dreams. Others spend them on endless distractions, believing there will always be another chance. Life doesn't reward the people who have more time. It rewards those who respect the time they already have. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Take the first step today. Learn something new. Start the project you've been postponing. Call the person you've been meaning to talk to. Read that first page. Write that first sentence. Because one small action today is worth more than 100 promises about tomorrow. Always remember. A watch can be replaced. Money can be earned again. Opportunities may return. But a single minute of life, once gone, is gone forever. Protect your time. Because your time is your life. And how you spend it will decide the story of your future.